Everybody, thanks for checking back in with the One Number YouTube channel. This is Eric Parker, and in today's video, what I want to do is walk through some different functions that you should know if you're going to be dealing with nulls in Tableau. So let's just go ahead and dive right into it by talking about the IFNULL function, right? So this may be something that you have seen before. So I'm going to go through Tableau's definition. I'm going to talk about what does that mean in layman's terms, and then we're going to look at some examples as well. And we're going to do that for IFNULL, ISNULL, and ZN as well. So first of all, what does Tableau say? It says the IFNULL function returns expression 1 if it is not null, otherwise it returns expression 2. Kind of makes sense. So my English definition, if a value is null, the function will return an alternative expression or value, otherwise it will return the original value. So you might be wondering, when would you use something like this? When would you want to replace a null value with something else? So one common example that I will come across is I want to create a merged field, but I still want to retain my original columns. So you can see in my example here, I said if null date 1, comma, date 2. So that way I could have like a, unified date calculation, but I'd still have my date 1 and date 2 columns if I ever need those for whatever reason. And then other times it might just be for something like a text table, you don't want the word null showing up. You want it to say something else like NA or whatever it might be. So you can see this example, replacing null values with a descriptive label. So this says if null category, comma, and then in quotes, so it's static text, no category listed. Okay, so let's just build one of these together, and this is based on a real-world scenario. I was working with a casino, and they were bringing together data across different types of offerings they have. People could play slots or cards or bet on football games or whatever people do at casinos. And each of these tables had their own unique date columns. So you could see you'd have something like bet date, poker date, slot date. And I wanted to unify these all together to say, oh, okay, well, how many total players was there on a given date? Or how many games did this person play on January 1st, or whatever that might be. So part of the way I did this is I wrote a calculated field. So I'm gonna go ahead and create a calculated field, and I'll call this my unified date. Zoom in a little bit for you there. So I'm going to say if null bet date, comma, poker date. Right? So now if it just so happens that the bet date is null, then the poker date's going to show up. And there's actually a third dimension to this, or a third date field, which is the slot date. So I'm actually going to do two if nulls. So then if both of those also happen to be null, then give me my slot date. Okay, so this is sort of the first expression, and then if both of those happen to be null, then do this. Could have done this in two different calculated fields, but it just wasn't necessary. So let me show you what happens here, what this looks like. So if I put unified date on my row shelf, all these different tables are unioned together, so I can see that it runs January 1st down through March 8th. But if I pull some of these individual date fields on here, I'll see that sometimes those values showed up, but sometimes they were nulls. Doesn't show up as clean. So now I could say something like, which date saw the most unique players? So I'm going to get player ID. I'm going to do my right-click, drag and drop trick to be able to add the count distinct aggregation to this. Set this to a bar. And at a quick glance, there was a couple times it hit the mid-30s, March 1st, and January 18th is what it looks like. So there you go. Just one reason that you might want to use IFNULL. All right, so now let's jump to a function which sounds very much like IFNULL, and so can often be confused, and that is ISNULL. So ISNULL returns true if an expression is null. Otherwise, it would return false if there was a value. So yeah, you can see my English definition. If a value is null, the expression returns true. If it is not null, it returns false. So when would you want this? So let's say you were just trying to get a count of how many rows of data had a null value, right? So you might set something like this up. If ISNULL ordered ID equals true, then 1. And okay? So you might be thinking like, this is kind of funky. Why do I need to use this expression, right? So let me kind of take this another way, right? So it said, how many returned records were there in each subcategory? Put subcategory on the row shelf. So when I was first using Tableau, I just thought, you know, I'll just call this like null record count. So what I thought is you could just say something like this. If order ID equals null, then 1. Okay. Now Tableau's not going to give you an error for this, right? You can see it does say the calculation is valid, but this is not going to work. Tableau doesn't really like it when you say like this plus null or this equals null. Nulls have to be kind of dealt with in their own special way, which is why some of these functions like IFNULL and ISNULL exist. So if I just hit OK and then put null record count on columns, I get a bunch of nulls, right? So not very helpful. But if I edit this and I say if ISNULL order ID returns equals true, right? So that is kind of how you would say, does this thing equal null? Kind of a little bit of a roundabout way of getting there, but yeah, if ISNULL order ID returns equals true, then 1. So now I can see, oh, and that updated even faster than I meant for it to. So I didn't really get to give you a warning there. But now I can see that there were quite a few records which didn't have an order ID and just happened to be null. So then now I can dive into, you know, why were there so many records? What does that mean for us? How are we going to handle that? Okay. So our third expression we're going to look at here in the realm of handling nulls is the ZN function, sometimes called the zero null or the Z null function. So the Tableau's definition is returns the expression if it is not null, otherwise returns 0. So in English, I actually like Tableau's definition, so we'll just keep it. And this is a function that you could accomplish what we're going to accomplish with ZN with the IFNULL function. It's just kind of a cleaner, faster way of writing it. So if you said if null sales, comma 0, that's the same thing as ZN. So what are some reasons you might want this? Well, first of all, if a value is null, but you want it to be represented as 0 for the purposes of, let's say, an average, then that's one good reason. Another is if you are adding values together or subtracting or, you know, any mathematical formula, and one of those values is real and one of them is null, the output's going to be null. So if you tell Tableau, hey, add column A and column B together, column A is 10, column B is null, the output is going to be null. Null is an unknown. So Tableau says, well, I don't know what the output is because it's a known variable 10 plus an unknown variable. So the output is also unknown. So sometimes you'll use the ZN function to account for those unknown variables to be able to tell Tableau, hey, if it is null for whatever reason, just treat it like a 0. Okay, so how would we do that? So in this example, it says, what was our combined sales each day? I've got two tables that were joined together. On some days of the week, there's, how would I say this? On some days of the week, there's sales from one place, like the ice cream shop had sales on Monday, but the chocolate store wasn't open, or vice versa, right? Those things can happen. So let me go ahead. I think actually I'm going to need to do two things here. I'm going to need to use our if null from earlier. Kind of forgot about this, so a little bonus exercise. Okay, if null this date, then that date. Let me just check my join clause while I'm at this. I just want to be totally confident that this is exactly what I want. Okay, I think it is. Cool. So now I'm going to put my unified date field on the row shelf. And just so that you can see this, I'm going to put my chocolate sales in my ice cream sales into a text table. So if I add these together and I don't use the ZN function, so if I create a calculated field and I'll call this combined sales, and I say, yeah, we'll just give you chocolate sales plus ice cream sales. Okay, put that on my worksheet. I'm gonna go ahead and move it to the end of the sheet so it kind of makes sense. Notice that the combined sales, anytime that one of those is null, like ice cream sales is null here, the combined sales output's null. Or down here, the chocolate sales is null, so the combined sales output is null. So one quick way for us to be able to handle this is by saying something like, give me the Zn of chocolate sales plus the Zn of ice cream sales. Now you can see that my combined sales has a record for every single day because there is sales from at least one of the stores on every one of those days. Okay, and I think my last thought when it comes to this Zn function is you do want to be thoughtful about where you use this. So occasionally something like the sum of the Zn of chocolate sales could give you a different output than the Zn of the sum of chocolate sales, okay? So if you're not sure, maybe just run it both ways. That's probably gonna go beyond the bounds of what we have time to cover in this video, but I would love to do a video on aggregations at some point, and we could cover this as part of that. But yeah, just be aware that, if you're not sure, like, I think I need to aggregate this, but I don't know where the Zn function goes, try it in both places and just see how that works out for you. So you're always welcome to message me as well if you're running into a roadblock. You can find my email through my website, onenumber.biz. I think that you could just comment on YouTube. I usually try and find those as well. So yeah, thanks so much for following along for this. I hope this gives you more confidence in dealing with nulls in your data set, and we'll look forward to catching you for another video soon.